Once the craft of crochet was used mainly to produce lacy mats, collars and cuffs, and simple decorative edgings. In recent years, however, the full potential of the craft has been discovered, and now it is used to make beautiful fashion garments for men and women, clothes for children and babies, and magnificent household accessories. Crochet is supremely satisfying to do, true, for work grows quickly and patterns are instantly effective. Also, as you use only a single stitch on a hook at a time, work is easy to handle and to carry around with you to do on a bus or train, in the garden, or on the beach. There is just one basic stitch to learn, and according to the way this one stitch is used and combined into groups or blocks, and also of course the yarn used, finished results can range from thick, dense fabrics for coats and suits to cobwebby, lacy fabrics for tablecloths and baby garments. That didn't work very well, this book is very heavy. So recently, I was given this book by my grandparents. They went through their bookshelves and they decided to give this to me. And according to the front of it, it is from, look at this thing. It looks like a penguin wearing a plague mask. Anyway, according to this book, oh, they're creepy. According to this book, it was printed in the 70s, so we are in for a treat. This is the book, Women's Day Complete Book of Handicrafts. And a truck just started backing up outside, so please excuse the beeping. And it is from 1973. Now, crochet is on page 128. I already knew that because we just had that little Skein Spider story hour, or story 5 minutes, but we'll skip to there. Here we go. Now, the first section is all about how to crochet, which I think we can skip that. We know how to do that. And I'm guessing this is in UK terms because they're using the word trebles. And I don't do trebles. I do double crochet. That is the equivalent, isn't it? The reason why I wanted to go through this is I thought it would be interesting to actually make something from this book. So we'll look through the crochet section, and we'll see if there's anything that stands out, and we can make that. And if there's a few things, maybe we can make a list and we'll have a, I don't know, a vintage crochet series or something. Motif mats and table runners. Well, that sounds boring. Whoa, okay, what's this? A fringed shawl and party skirt, which is just something I need in my life. I go to lots of parties. I don't think I would ever use a shawl, but we could try making a skirt. Maybe that can go on the maybe list. Oh, that is fire. Look at that. Oh, I need to make me one of those. Chef's kiss. So that's probably going to be my next project. And also that will cross something else off my bucket list because I still have yet to make a granny square. It gets better. There's a fringe. Okay, so we have the collared version or the fringe version. You know, we could always combine those, the collar and the fringe. Taking my first steps to becoming a serious fashion icon with these. So I think I'm going to go ahead and try and follow this pattern and crochet myself a vest. And then maybe when that's done, we can revisit this book and try either the shawl or the skirt, probably the skirt. I'm never ever going to use a shawl. Let's pause to appreciate this momentous occasion. My first ever granny square. I've made 2 so far, and it did take a little bit longer than anticipated because I had to translate and then restructure the pattern into a format that didn't make my brain just freak out. A minor issue I'm having with them at the moment is that they're not the right size, and I did expect that because the pattern calls for an Aran weight yarn and I only have DK weight yarn. They're supposed to be 3.5 inches, which is roughly 12 centimeters, but at the moment they're only about 2.5 inches or 9 centimeters. So they're not too far off, but I'll add an additional 2 rounds and then see how that measures up. Measures up. I like it when puns happen unintentionally. And if they end up slightly smaller than the specified size. I think that will be okay because I sort of measured myself and how this vest would go together, and making them the size that the pattern calls for might have been a little bit too big on me anyway. There we go, 2 additional rounds added. I'll measure that quickly and see what we get. 13 centimeters, which is actually too big because that's about 4 inches. I'll leave this one as it is. I might do 1 additional round on my second one and then measure that. There's attempt number 2. I'll measure this one as well. And this time we have 10.5 centimeters, but that's where I will leave it for now. I'll do a little bit of measuring, a little bit of experimenting with my squares. After a bit of experimentation, I have settled on this pattern for my granny squares. This is actually the same number of rounds as my original test square was, but what I did was drop down to a 3.5mm hook, and in doing so, I've reduced the size of the square down to the size that the pattern actually calls for, which I'm glad that worked out for me. And with that figured out, all that remains is to crochet myself 49, that's my 50th, 49 more squares. And after that, we can begin putting this 70s inspired granny square vest together. Alrighty, I've gone ahead and made myself 50 squares. I've got my purple ones and I've got 10 of each of these colors too. The pattern does call for 52, but because I don't know how I'm going to lay these out yet, in what configuration, I'm leaving those 2 for last because I might need, depending on what pattern I go with, I might need to make them in a particular color. So my next step is to arrange these in the configuration that I want, and we're going to be following the, that was close, I thought I was going to knock everything off there. We're going to be following the layout in this book, which is, good move past me, thinking ahead and bookmarking the page, which is this layout here. So we've got 4 rows of, you know what, plan B. So as you can see from the close-up view, we have 4 rows of 10 squares across, then 2 rows of 4 squares across, followed by the two columns of 2 squares at the top. I will need to crochet these 2. I'm going to play around with these squares and just figure out how I want these colors to be arranged. All the granny squares have finally been joined together, and if anyone was wondering if I blocked these, the answer is no. And the reason for that is there's something that I've wanted to try instead of blocking, and that is this. I've never ironed crochet before, but I've seen it done and it's something that I've wanted to try, so I thought this project was a good opportunity to do that. I'm a little bit hesitant because hot instrument, plastic, not always the best combination, but I'm going to start with my iron on the lowest setting, and I'm going to use my test squares before I iron the actual vest. All right, I'll plug this in and I'll go grab my ironing mat, and then we can get to testing on some squares. All right, I think we're ready to test this. I've got it on, I'm going to try the nylon setting, which is just a little bit after the minimum setting. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, just do a little bit on the edge. Okay, it's good. Nothing's melting so far. Slightly, just lightly. Okay. And there we have a nice flat square. And nothing went wrong. Nothing caught on fire, nothing melted, so I would class that as a success. The bar is very low. I will now attempt to iron my vest. I'm going to approach this really cautiously. I'm only going to do probably one square at a time. Take it nice and slow because I don't want to end up melting this even if my iron is on a fairly low setting. Well, that worked pretty well. And it didn't take anywhere near as long as individually blocking 52 bloody squares. I did have to keep slowly increasing the temperature on my iron because me and this iron go way back. I know her very well and she's a stingy bitch, so she won't maintain the heat. So I needed to keep turning that up a little bit. But yeah, ironing my squares did not end in the catastrophe that I was picturing. Now that that is out of the way, I'm going to join the straps of my vest to the front, so I'll do that on both sides. So here's something I forgot to take into account. When I was working out my layout, I didn't think about where these squares were going to join together, and because of that, I've ended up with 2 purple squares next to each other. How about the other side? You know, it wouldn't be too bad if they actually matched, because then I can say I did it deliberately. Ah, bugger, nah. Okay. Oh well, I'm not changing it now, it's staying like that. This vest it's kind of big on me. I followed the pattern. My squares are the right size according to that pattern, and I followed the layout as it was in the book, but it's just larger than I'd like a vest to be. And making them the size that the pattern calls for might have been a little bit too big on me anyway. I could unpick some of the squares. I think if I removed the bottom row, probably 2 columns from either end and possibly one from the straps, that would give me a better fit. But then I'd be left with squares that I don't really have a use for, and I could make more and, you know, make another project from the squares, but I don't really have enough yarn left to do that. I could probably make an additional 4 squares if I'm lucky, because I'm running out of the rainbow yarn. That being the case, I reckon the best thing to do in this situation is to ditch the pattern for now and do my own thing, because it's going to be the difference between me wearing this piece and me not wearing this piece. With a bit of tweaking, I think I can turn this into a pretty nice oversized cardigan. Am I bummed that I'm not going to get a cool vintage vest? Yes, but there's nothing stopping me from making more granny squares and crocheting this pattern again, just a slightly edited version to give me a better fit. And silver lining, if I do that, I can choose a different color palette. I went with the pastel rainbows because I had those yarns in my stash and I wanted to use them up. I don't dislike them, but they wouldn't be my first choice if I had unlimited color options. So yeah, maybe we'll revisit this pattern again in the future and make ourselves an actual 70s vest. But for now, this video is turning into the pastel rainbow oversized cardi video. Not where I thought I'd end up when I started this project. The ribbing at the waistband is finished. I've done that all the way along. The next bit I'm going to tackle are the sleeves, and these armholes seem pretty big to me, so I might do a bit of decreasing my first few rounds. Here's the thing, I finished the sleeves. I love you too, but can you not interrupt me, please? Yeah, we're going to have a guest. Hello. We're going to have a guest for a little while. My sister and I just had to move his cage, so he's going to be staying in this room for a little bit. Can you, yeah, I know, I love you too, but can you just be quiet? Can you just be quiet for a few minutes, please? Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Riley. Okay. So anyway, here's the thing. I've done the sleeves, but I managed to bugger up somehow. When I did the first one, this sleeve, I wrote down what I did as I was crocheting, and then my plan was just to replicate it on the second one. And I buggered up along the line somewhere because they're not quite the same width. It's not a drastic difference. It's only about three or four stitches difference. To be honest, I just did not have the energy to frog it and redo it. If it had been a huge difference, I would have, but because the difference is so small, I couldn't be bothered. Can you be quiet, please? Yeah, I know. And now that the sleeves are done, kind of buggered up a little bit, but done, I need to tackle the neckline, and I'm not 100% sure what I want to do on that. You know what? You're going to have to move for a sec because I need to put this on. Yeah, I need to put this on. All right. We'll be back in 5. I finally got it on, and as you can see, the neckline section here is just really open, really wide, and I don't really like it. I am going to put ribbing up the sides here, and I will have buttons which will bring it this closed, but I just don't like this section. I kind of thought of cheesing it a little bit and just sewing the top of these squares here to the sides of the square above them. And I knew that was going to bunch this up here. So like that. But I think it'll just be bunched up too much if I did it. If it was a little bit, I think I could get away with it. It's kind of like darts for crochet, but that doesn't look very good, does it? I don't think I'm going to be able to cheat my way out of this one. So instead, I'm thinking of crocheting the triangle version of the granny square. Well, it's not really a granny square in that case, is it? The triangle, maybe granny triangle, is that the right word? I'll crochet some granny triangles and I'll just stick them in here. So hopefully that will help better shape this neckline. You gonna help me, bird? You gonna help me? Yeah? All right, let's do it. Two crochet triangles done, and that panel, it was really easy. Now that I've done the square, finally bitten the bullet and made a granny square, that was a really easy pattern to figure out. So I'm just going to put those in there, and then the same on the opposite side. It's not for you, you can't have it. At the same time, I also crocheted myself 2 additional squares because I want some pockets. I hate clothing without pockets, and anyone who's bought women's clothing knows that, you know, we get shafted when it comes to pockets. So I'm making sure to include some in this cardigan. Yeah, you agree? You agree, Riley? Excuse me, Mr. Riley. Can you please get off my work? The addition of the triangles have definitely improved the neckline. It's still a little bit big and gaping, but it is better. And I added myself some pockets because they automatically improve any garment that you add them to. I'm still undecided what I want to do up here, whether it's going to be a collar or a hood. But I think before I even try doing any of that, I'll add the ribbing to the inside here, and I'll attach the buttons. Before I start the ribbing, I'll choose the buttons that I'm going to use. I've got my button case. This thing has been in my family for a few generations. I guess some families have jewelry or furniture as heirlooms. I have buttons. I've sewn on the buttons and I'm just checking off all the firsts in this video. First time making a granny square, first time adding buttons to clothing, and I think they look okay. I was a bit worried because I haven't done this before. I was a bit worried that I was going to make the chain space too loose, but you know what? I think I did all right. Now that that's done, I can't do up a button one-handed. Now that that's done, I'm going to add the collar. I was considering adding a hood, but because the neckline is just so wide, I think a hood would be kind of pointless and honestly a waste of yarn. So I'm just going to add a collar. Well, I finished it. And I have a new microphone because my old little lapel mic finally gave up the ghost. RIP lapel mic, you served me very well. But this is going to take some getting used to, and I have to figure out all the settings and soundproofing and stuff, so I hope this doesn't sound too terrible as it is. You're in my way. I think it's fair to say that I failed making a 70s inspired vintage vest. But I succeeded in making a cardigan, sort of. I mean, this thing does look like it was shut out by a pastel rainbow unicorn, but you can make an argument that it is, in fact, a cardigan. It's definitely a flawed cardigan. As I've mentioned several times at this point, I think I do not like how wide the collar is. I could only find 4 of these yellow buttons. So there's not one on the bottom. The sleeves could have been a little bit longer, and if you'll remember, I buggered up and made them slightly different widths. So overall, I rate this project failed successfully. Yeah, I'll take it. So obviously this project didn't turn out anything like I expected it to. So at some point in the future, I do want to revisit this pattern, but I'm just going to make sure to edit it so I can actually have a vest that fits me a lot nicer than what this turned out to be. I'm also kind of interested in making more clothing from granny squares because, as I mentioned at the start of this video, this was my first ever attempt at making a granny square. I had not done it before. I was just never really interested. But now that I have, and I've joined them together, and I've done the granny triangle as well, I'm kind of intrigued because I want to play around with them and figure out how many ways you can put them together to achieve different looks. That might be something that we go ahead and tackle in the future. But for today, we are done here. Let me know what you thought of this pastel rainbow monstrosity. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I will see you all next week with another video.